Let's go.
All right, everyone. Welcome to day two of the Colaeb Speaker Conference. Super excited to welcome Evan Leaphart. He's a startup founder. Let everyone do their introductions. John B. Johnson, who I met this year, and grateful to meet Evan in Miami. Met John in Cleveland. So excited to really kind of connect the coast in this conversation and just learn a lot. So I'm gonna hide myself and be in the bed. Good morning.
All right. Evan,
Morning, brother.
what's up, man? It's great to
Not too
kick off
much,
the
man. How
day.
you living?
Great to kick
Yes,
off the
sir.
day with you, man. Let's go.
Yes, sir.
So,
Yes, sir.
why don't you introduce yourself and I'll introduce myself.
Yeah, how's it going, everybody? So, Evan Leaphart, founder and CEO of Kredit Academy. Kredit Academy, we're in the business of building introductory credit experiences. So, our first product and market was Kitty Credit, a chore tracking app to help parents teach kids under 12 about credit. And now we're launching our namesake product, Kredit Academy, which is the world's first credit card for the next generation that places an emphasis on education over spend.
Let's go. How many times have you said that?
Man, it just every
Just in
time
the
I'm like
last
working
week.
on it each time, man. Yeah, like in the last week, man, I was like it was probably like 15.
Let's go. 15. He's moving. Fundraiser mode.
Yes,
Yo,
sir.
all right, everybody. Good morning. My name is John B. Johnson. I'm founder and principal of a small studio. We are a boutique design studio with a mission to bring peace to people's lives. Right. So over the last 6 years, I've been helping creatives, founders, leaders, people like Evan himself, help them understand who they are and how to translate that into the marketplace powerfully. Right. Do digital design, branding, product design, so on and so forth. So I'm excited to be here. Excited to talk to leaders like Manny and Evan because it's special. It's special, especially right now. One of the reasons why I wanted to be here and what I'm excited to talk to you about, Evan, is just this economy and the industry that we're in right now. Is it's hard to be different. There's a lot of commodities out there, a lot of commodity products, a lot of commodity content and verbiage. That's why I asked when you introduce yourself, like how many times have you said that? Because to be able to craft a message that's authentic to who you are as a person, right, and then share that with the world is something that cannot be commoditized, right? So when we're talking about marketing, I always say the last thing I want to do is be a commodity, right? Something that somebody else can do. You know what I mean? So I'm happy to be here and talk with you about that. So let's start there, man. You said you said that intro at least 15 times this week.
Yeah.
When did you start Kitty Credit, and how did you start to frame this business that you launched, this startup, and tie it to who you are as a founder, as a person? How
Yeah.
did how did you start that?
Continuous work in progress. There's like some kind of definitive moments in my storytelling journey around this, right? Like the why is always easy. It's like, man, I turned 18, messed my credit up, and basically what happened to me, I don't want to have happen to anybody else. So that's been the easiest part to talk about because it is like your story, right? But how do you weave in that to like your messaging, your business model, like all of these things? Um, and it was just a work in progress. I remember when I was pitching Kitty Credit way before like Kredit Academy was even kind of a thing. Um, I had my pitch deck, and I was just so junior level at like presenting what the business was, right? So I would say, and this is our problem, and this is our solution, and this is our team, right?
Yeah.
And wasn't effectively narrating like our journey. And then I remember I had a good conversation with a buddy of mine. I mention this often, where like I was losing every pitch competition. I was like, man, like is this for me? Like I know I can sell, but like nobody's really like into this. He's like, because you're telling the pitch deck as it's your story. Like you should tell your story and then just have the pitch deck match that. So then I like rephrased that. So I started to like figure out like, hey, what's the story? Like okay, you know, you need to talk about your problem, market size, traction team, but like weave that into like how you would just want to talk about it, and then build the slides after. And once I did that, I think this was like 2021 maybe, won like 10 pitch competitions that year, right? And it's not about like, hey, we just won these competitions and this money, like trophies for the wall. It was like, all right, like your story's starting to get better, you know?
Yeah.
Um, but then 2022 happened, and then we knew we were getting ready to launch Kredit Academy. And I got stuck again, right? Like I got so kind of I was like, man, this works. Like, don't go out of this. Like, how do you start to tell a new story? Because you're kind of growing up the product journey, right? Like essentially think of like Kitty Credit like Nick Jr. and Kredit Academy like Nickelodeon, right? So like, how do you explain this as like a journey versus like a pivot or like two separate products, right? It's like this. And I didn't really have that type. So I remember at the end of last year, I was trying to do that, and it wasn't connecting, right? Because I was going back to what I was doing in 2020. I'm like, and this is what we've done, and this is what we're doing, and this is what the product is. And like, it's like that doesn't really sound like a story.
Yeah.
Um, so I had to kind of change it, not to go on a long tangent, but then it was like, you know, this year I kind of figured it out again, and we started to kind of see the fruits of our labor again, you know?
Yeah. You said something so I think perfect and powerful. You said one of your mentors, like you're letting the pitch deck, or what, you're making the pitch deck your story versus the
I was
story
letting
being
them,
your
yeah,
pitch deck.
exactly. Yep.
Right. I've worked with over the years, I've worked with a lot of impact driven founders like yourself, right? You built this company because you wanted to create an impact in the world, one that was impacting you personally, but one that you know has impacted millions and millions and millions of people around the world, right? So when you're an impact founder, your story is your business, right? Your perspective, your lived experiences is your business. So when you tell that, and you are able to, the blessing of being able to tie your story to a business, that's a privilege. Not many people can do that, and I don't think it's as common as I wish it was, right? But that what I found with a lot of impact driven founders is they try to do what the business world does instead of just doing what they already know so deeply and in your core. It's like you don't have to be trained on your story, but you do have to be trained on how to align it into the marketplace, right? And I think that that's what marketing is all about. That's what branding is all about, right? That's why we do this work. That's why we practice our stories, so that it aligns and it penetrates the market powerfully, right? More people realize like, yo, I'm not just trying to sell you something, I'm telling you who I am, right?
Yep.
What a better way to sell, right, than just be able to tell people who you are. That sells enough, right? That's a beautiful
Yep.
thing. Have you found that being an impact driven, would you identify as an impact driven entrepreneur?
I would, because of
Okay.
what I'm doing now. I would not say that all my businesses by design have been such. It's been like, hey, how do we get the bills paid?
Yeah.
Prior to this, right? So I've had like 9 businesses before, but this was the thing I always wanted to do. So it feels like just from an entrepreneurial path, I was able to step into the truth of like the thing I really wanted to work on. You know, I think entrepreneurs are always like, you can ask them like, hey, if you could do any business though, I know you're doing this and it's working well, but if you could do anything, what would you want? Right. And then
Yeah.
it's like, well, I would be doing this. And like, I've had those conversations before and it was this, right? So to be doing that, like, I can say now I embody that.
Yeah, that's good. Well, I think for me, I found that a lot of impact driven entrepreneurs have found success when they've stayed true to who they are, and that's what you just articulated, which I think is really powerful. So thank you for telling that story. Thank you for sharing that, man. Let's go back to what you just said. How have your previous endeavors and your previous businesses help you succeed with, you know, Kitty Credit and now Kredit Academy?
I think a lot of it's rooted in the basics, right? Like as I've maneuvered through like the world of tech over the past couple of years, like I'll see people who come into the market with way better product, right? Like way better traction, right? And then it's just some of the basics things that I thought were not necessarily common knowledge, but just as an entrepreneur, like maybe overlooked, right? Like the business structure that's being formed, right? If you're trying to go like the venture route, like understanding like distributions of equity, how you think about your accounting and taxes, like cash versus accrual, right? Like those types of things are kind of, it's agnostic of like what type of business you have. Like if you're trying to build a backable venture type of concept or just like a lifestyle type of business. Uh so I think that was what shaped me the most. But there was a lot of areas I didn't know. Like I had never raised private equity before, right? So I didn't know what like a safe was. And even some of the more technically focused terms like MVPs, wireframes, and prototypes, that was like where my ignorance shined bright.
Yeah, that's good, man. Well, let me get to some of these marketing questions for you as you've navigated building this startup. One thing I want to mention for everybody that's on, welcome everybody. Good morning. So I got the luxury of seeing Evan pitch at the 43 North competition back in, what was that, October, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, and Evan and Kredit Academy, they won $1 million, $1 million investment from
sir.
43 North. You're about to relocate to Buffalo, right?
Yep.
From
Yep.
you excited? Are you excited for that?
You know what I'm excited? So I grew up north, right? So it's like I live in Miami. So when you say you're going to Buffalo, everybody's like, "Oh, be ready."
Yeah.
It's like I know what that life is like that. I think what I'm most excited about is like I find myself like shopping for things that like I didn't shop for like my high school era. Like I'm like, man, like how much do Averex jackets go for these days? You know, like what are we still wearing Timberlands? Like I'm asking like my New York friends, like our North Face is still cool. Like what are we like? Our first downs even a thing anymore? You know what I mean? Things that just weren't like in the forefront of my mind anymore. So I feel like a grandpa in that sense. So like that part is actually exciting. But I think just speaking to the program itself, like I've been in accelerator programs before and everything, and I've always tried to have like at least 1 to 2 key takeaways programmatically. I think what's been unique about this program is how the whole city kind of like gathers around you. Like I gave a story where my mom, who came to see the event, she went to the airport the next day with our shirt, and somebody was like, "We saw y'all last night. Like your son won." So it's like the whole community really like gets behind you. Like I'd never been in a pitch competition with like 4,000 people in the audience, and I was like, man, like I looked at him like, oh, did y'all have like another event with this? It was like, no, it's just the competition. I'm like, so that just shows you kind of the magnitude of like what it means to Buffalo, and like the support that I felt from the city is like, man, like if we really just put our heads down in 2024, like I think we can really come out with a significant traction, not just for like our permeation in like the city of Buffalo, but like just the business in general, right? And they have some real success stories, right? From ACV, which is a company they had and early on that IPO, to Squire, Black led company, killing in this space. I think they've raised over like $140 million or something. So very honored to be a part of that tribe.
Yeah, I love it. And shout out to another one, Share Black
Yes.
company, husband and wife, Courtney and Ty Caldwell. They just recently got a partnership with JC
Penney, right?
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
yeah.
Yes, sir.
It's just huge. So y'all are doing great things up there. I want to attest to that. Like I drive from Cleveland to Buffalo just for that event, because it's a community event. It's a community endeavor. Something special about building a grassroots entrepreneurial community, right? Startup community. It feels very grassroots, right? When you get somebody at the airport, like, yo, you were at that pitch competition last night. Like, what?
Yeah.
But let me ask you a question targeted towards you going from metropolitan area to another metropolitan area. How do you approach marketing now that you're in a new city, right? How are you planning on building the Kredit Academy brand, going from say Miami or Tulsa over to Buffalo, and saying, all right, now we're a Buffalo company? What are some marketing approaches that you plan on implementing this year to really capitalize on that relocation?
I think what I like about being in Buffalo, presently being in Tulsa as part of the Act House cohort, is these are very blue collar communities, right? Um, and I try to again take something from like every step of my journey where I'm at. Like I think Miami is vibrant. It gives fun. It's exciting, right? Like people immediately kind of resonated with just like a good time, right? So even when I say like I'm coming in like in be in Tulsa or Buffalo, like, hey, what's going on here this evening? And people are like, well, it's not Miami. Like I didn't ask for that. Like I'm just asking what goes on here. But why that matters and why that ties to marketing is basically learning how to essentially kind of sell the business of fun, but bringing a product to communities that really need it, like the blue collar communities. Like that's what Kredit Academy is for, right? Like, and our go to market is B2B2C. So we're helping brands, smaller financial institutions launch their own credit products in hopes that they can engage on a deeper level with the current customer base that they have, or in a customer base that they're looking to connect to, right? And doing that in a real way. And we don't want to be the folks that just kind of start a Miami-based company that's starting to put these products in these communities and not really understanding how they work. So just really seeing like the fabric of like Buffalo and like the city of good neighbors, like all of these like things, like you start to see like it's a real thing, and like making sure that we're a part of that.
Yeah.
It'll have what will seem like small changes in the way that we see things will have like massive effects on our marketing, right? So like we will make sure that our market messaging like speaks to would somebody in Buffalo love this video, right? And like when we ask, like our focus groups will be a lot more authentic in that sense. So I'm really excited about like just diving in with the community in that way, because it'll carry over into our messaging.
Yeah, that's good. It's really good. And I think with even when what I found, those blue collar, maybe even you call them second tier cities, aren't usually as tech enabled as you would hope, right? So especially the blue collar individuals, they may only go to those established regional banks, right? Or those institutional organizations that aren't always the most innovative or advanced. They're pretty legacy, right? They're pretty traditional. So you
Yep.
bringing this new perspective, this new tech, this new software, this new educational platform, this new approach, right? This new perspective to a blue collar city is immediately you're almost set apart.
Yep.
Immediately you're like, whoa, this is different. I mean, just even your aesthetic, right? And I think as a Black founder, right, as a Black leader, no matter where we go, right, there's this aesthetic of like, hey, I want to make sure that we're different. I want to make sure, for me, even coming to Cleveland, right, I say Cleveland is I'm not going to ask Manny for his opinion on this, but I think Cleveland is a second tier city, very similar to Buffalo. But Buffalo is doing something that I feel like taking advantage of the beauty of reimagining what the city could be, reimagining what
Yeah.
the community could be, reimagining what the ecosystem could be, and they're almost funneling everything into a laser. And I see 43 North as that, right? Funneling it into a laser that's saying, all right, we're about to reach the world. And they're recruiting
Yep.
people like yourself to come to that city. And I think it's really special. Now, Manny, don't get all, you're not allowed in this conversation. All right. And I think it's beautiful, and you're an example of that, man. So I want to acknowledge you for that, and I appreciate you sharing on that. Let's talk something that really I've dove into with a small studio. When I started a small studio in Seattle, I didn't want to just be another agency, right? Service agency that does services for companies. I didn't want to be that. And I spent 6 years really trying to understand what would set us apart from the masses. Right. And what I came up with eventually after getting my master's in architecture and my MBA is I was really passionate about working with people like yourself that have a story, that have a perspective,
Mhm.
that care deeply about what they're creating, you know? And I realized that it was way more than just branding that I was doing with these people. I was actually helping them understand who they are as an individual, right? And there was a psychology in there. There was a lot of deep work, a lot of deep questioning, you know, that came from that. And ultimately, here 6 years later, I realized that this craft of identity architecture was something that I wanted to bring to the masses. And that was the one thing that set us apart from all of these other agencies, where said, hey, who are you? Why do you care about this? All right, let us help you translate that into the marketplace powerfully. You know what I mean? And it's taken me 6 years to get there, to just even realize that, hey, yo, especially in this world that we're living in, where I talked about commodities, right? Like, I don't want to be a commodity. And how can I not become a commodity in this industry where everybody's just putting out massive amount of content, right? So as you enter into this new phase of Kredit Academy and Kitty Credit and all the success that you've had with this organization, as you enter this new phase, how are you what are you doing to make sure that you stay set apart from the masses, right? You stay set apart from all of the or other organizations out there that claim to be helping with your credit, that claim to be helping you build financial security and financial education and so on and so forth. What are you doing to make sure that you stay, what we like to say at a small studio, one of none, right? How do you make sure you stay that way moving forward?
I think we just stay steadfast in our mission, right? And like, while that sounds like cliche to say, like, it's been the only thing that's allowed us to be different, right? And what I'm saying by that is, for example, prior to Kredit Academy even being launched, right? Like, just with Kitty Credit, we're still figuring things out as we go, right? Like, we didn't just start out and like crush this thing, and like we still have massive room for improvement. When you look at like the financial literacy for youth space, it can be massively saturated if you just look at it through that lens.
Mhm.
But when you look at it through the lens of educating specifically, like a core focus on the concept of credit, that's where we shine bright, right? Like, there's the examples of like organizations doing that are few and far between. And because of that and staying true to that, it's allowed us to have partnerships with massive organizations like Equifax and Discover, like folks that when you see their name, you think of credit, right? If we weren't just incredibly explicit about that focus, right? Like, and maybe we have a partnership like leading with Reebok and think like, like it could be a little like scattered, right? And because you don't, as a startup, you have minimal resources, like you can't boil the ocean. So you got to really understand like, why are we going this way?
Mhm.
Um, a core customer focus of us is like credit unions and community banks, right? And I really started through like learning some of the challenges of credit unions. I like stumbled into the space, but it was like, man, like let's really figure out a core way to penetrate this. We saw that 60% of kids whose parents bank at credit unions end up banking elsewhere, right? So we're like, man, that's a real challenge they face. Like, let's get smarter about the space. Let's ask people who've been in the space for 10, 20, 30 plus years to make sure that they could use a product like ours. So I think that the thing is, when you're just kind of centered in like the MVP statement of your business, not in terms of like a prototype, MVP meaning mission, value, and purpose, right? Like, those components will help you drive decisions. It'll help you turn down investment, right? Like, we last year was there was highs of getting $1 million, but I mean we turned down over like 6 figures in investment last year because it was either not aligned on like terms that we wanted, or like we just knew that taking that money would we would be taking this money to potentially shift us in a different direction, or maybe they don't fully believe in what we're doing, and I'm end up taking that money, and now like with that I feel indebted, or in a sense obligated to try to prove them why we're right, and then
Mhm.
that's slowing the path towards growth. right? So like just being centered in like what you set out to do will help you evaluate like your next steps, because you can work backwards from that.
That's good. I think something powerful you just said there that I want to build on is the power of saying no. And when it comes to marketing, sometimes I feel like that's a question we should be asking ourselves. What are we saying no to? Forget saying yes. Like, what are we saying no to? One of the books I love is called The One Thing. Right. I don't know if you ever read it, Evan. Called The One Thing. And in The One Thing, he says every no should be followed up by, or every yes should be followed up by 1,000 no's to protect that yes. Right. And as an agency owner, I think the common trend in the marketplace is to get as many clients as you can, right? Scale up resources, scale up your capacity, all those things. And very early on, why I called my company A Small Studios, because I knew I didn't want to be like that big agency that just has massive amount of clients and doing everything, because I wanted to be very intimate with everybody we worked with. So at a certain point throughout our growth, we said no to a lot of clients. Right? Hey, like, no, we're not a good fit for you. And what you said beautifully about the investment is you said you'd spend a lot of time trying to convince them about your mission, convince them about your value, convince them about your purpose. And it's like the same thing with agency. Spend a lot of time trying to convince them that they made the right decision picking you, versus like, yo, let's go together. We are partners now. Let's move together swiftly, versus this whole like client, customer or client agency relationship that sometimes is very friction heavy, because they're like, well, I paid you, so now prove to me that you're good. It's like, no, you paid me because we are good, from the first place. And we got to be set in that for now. So I want to encourage everybody that's listening, like, to really, understand that no's can be powerful, and no's can save you a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of focus, a lot of resources. So you said something also, as a startup, you are sometimes resource strapped, especially an impact driven startup that's not just spending the cash frivolously, right, to scale up and to meet investors' expectations, or maybe even ridiculous expectations. One thing you said was like, the resources are limited, so you got to be very focused with where you're putting your money. You know what I mean? Yep. And I think that no protects your focus. So oh, Manny's giving us the hook. All right. So Evan, great talking with you, brother. Go ahead,
brother, man. It's great. It's
in.
great meeting you in general, man. I'm happy to be on this journey with you, man.
Let's go.
And Manny, thank you.